So for whatever reason you haven't heard, Sui Ishida is back. The same author had done Tokyo Ghoul and Tokyo Ghoul Re has a brand new manga known as Choujin X. I recently done a video on the first chapter just to introduce people to it, get a better idea for it, but now I'm going to take it a whole lot further. And yes, it has a lot of things to do with symbolism, concept, themes, etc. It may only be the first chapter, and I'm definitely overthinking a lot of things, but that's kind of the beauty of it. It's rather fun to do, and knowing how Sui Ishida works, the stories he likes to tell, a lot of the symbolism and themes that he did do within Tokyo Ghoul and Tokyo Ghoul Re, we have a pretty solid basis to work around with what he may or may not do. With that said, however, there is one thing I want to talk about to kind of start this off. Symbolism for me is something that can be very much over-exaggerated. I think it's a whole lot of fun to look into deeper meanings and overthink and overanalyze certain aspects of panels and stories and characters, etc., etc. There is a litany of paths that you can go down to grab onto some very interesting details. With this, however, symbolism is only a harness for the storytelling experience. It is not a main weapon. Usually something within the background, and the reason why it's in the background is because it's not something that is normally or should even be used as a main up and front concept or interpretation that can be taken in so many different ways. To put it simply, if your story used symbolism as a massive weapon to tell miniature or micro stories for characters or arcs, themes, emotions, mentalities, whatever it may be, you are providing a small fraction of artwork and giving all the work to the readers to go out and search for a meaning that may not even be found. The readers will then come back with so many different interpretations and not have a clear understanding on what you as an author is trying to portray. So a lot of the time you'll notice that symbolism is used just as an added benefit, avoiding using it as a main weapon and more so as a harness to enhance everything that is already in the forefront, to avoid as much confliction or misunderstanding / miscommunication as possible. A prime example of this is with Choujin X's first chapter. Knowing how Ishida likes to represent his series and the things that he enjoys doing and hiding within plain sight, there is a lot of things that you can overanalyze. Me even talking about the Ubermensch or Overman is somewhat of a bit of a stretch, but my purpose is to connect it to the story, hopefully a supportive and healthy way, something that has a backbone or weight behind it. When you overanalyze any sort of symbolism, there's so many pros and cons that come with it that may not even be connected or be an accurate representation of a character, especially because we only have one chapter. So if I take any sort of numbers from that first chapter, type it into Google to find the symbolic meaning behind it, you're going to get an answer, but that does not mean it's going to be a representation of what's actually in that chapter until we have a better understanding of these individuals, of the world that they live in. Then you can kind of morph and dictate what is accurate and what isn't based on your own personal opinion. That's not to say that you shouldn't do it and take it the wrong way, because it's always fun to do, but just know that there is pretty much an endless rabbit hole, and when you're searching for symbolism, you can make it up in your own head just by viewing things a very specific way. Obviously there's the more obvious ones that actually give it to you, but there's some that you may seek a little bit too hard for and create the symbolism for yourself that may have never actually been there. With that, I guess it comes to each individual's own interpretation. So with all of that said, let's overthink Ubermensch, the quite literal title of Choujin X and its translation. For those of you who don't know, Choujin X can be directly translated to Superman X, which can also be morphed into Superhuman X. Maybe over time, they may change it to the English variation, but for now, it is Choujin X, and it's being used as Choujin within the actual manga to describe people with very specific abilities, similar to ghouls in Tokyo Ghoul. The Ubermensch is a philosophical concept that is penned or conceptualized by a person known as Friedrich Nietzsche, and one of his phrases goes something a little bit like this: God is dead, God remains dead, and we have killed him. How shall we comfort ourselves, the murderers of all murderers? You may think just from this statement it's religious in nature, but is more so generalized to a higher power or a higher being that is religious in every extent. It's kind of anything that is favored and morphed or grouped around as a worshipping. Nietzsche uses religion specifically specifically because in his eyes it takes people away from the worldly life that they are currently living, all of the problems, issues, and situations in today's world, in this moment, in this time, and transports them to otherworldliness, focusing on a place, a thing, an individual, or an idea that is out of this realm of existence. For the most part, it doesn't really have anything to do with believability or faith, but more so the spanning of attention and where it's actually being diverted to. So with humanity and the death of God, it creates this void, and it gives birth to nihilism, which nihilism in its very simplistic terms is a belief that all values are baseless and that nothing can be known or communicated. However, to conflict or avoid this nihilism, thanks to the death of God and the void that is created from it, one has to find purpose and meaning, which in turn gives birth to what is known as Ubermensch, a literal Superman or superhuman, or more specifically known as Overman. Already you can see that the title of Choujin X translates directly to this. However, there could potentially be more things here that directly link to the powers of Choujin X and the individuals within it, like Tokio and Azuma. Basically, humanity must strive to be Ubermensch, Overman, Superman, superhuman, or Choujin, as humanity needs something to take the role of God and strive towards in regards to human evolution. Human evolution potentially equating to Choujin being the next step of humanity, having these newfound abilities, whether it be man-made or completely natural, that gives birth to an individual's innate ability. With this, humanity can aim to create or become Ubermensch or Choujin. So if you think about the vials that we had within the first chapter, this could be in correlation to that there is either government, personal, or scientific madness going along this core trait of Ubermensch, using it as the framework of Choujin X narrative and creating people into the next step of human evolution by either weaponizing it as some sort of bioweapon or either altering the DNA structure of some sort within a human to give birth to this next step in humanity, this newfound power, a Choujin. There is some core traits that come with Ubermensch, psychologically strong. The Ubermensch are not concerned with otherworldliness, and they focus completely only on the here and now within this world. Ubermensch also rise above all moralities and values to create their very own, not to be controlled, but to create a path for themselves, both morally and in values, dominating their own life and world. So you have a bunch of Choujin that are giving birth to these new abilities that are stepping up above humanity, the next step in potential human evolution, that are creating their own free will, they're creating their own morality, their own beliefs, their own values that is above whatever the general distinctive is right now. This can be good and bad, and this is where the overthinking it comes in a little bit too much, where the X in Choujin could actually lie, which sometimes an X can be indicative to conflict. And if you're going down the path of Tokio and Azuma, two very completely different individuals that both are most likely going to have Choujin abilities, they could come to conflict with their own newfound morals and values and what they feel like they should do for the humanity below them. One may be more benevolent, but one could also be very evil. Considering it is specific to individuals, they clash and conflict. So it's Ubermensch X or Choujin X in a titling format, and Tokio and Azuma may be the forefront for it. In what ways could Tokio and Azuma conflict? Honestly, it's kind of endless. There's a litany of different paths that they can go down, and it kind of boils down for now to the animal that represents them. The final thing, however, is Ubermensch is a goal for mankind, to find meaning by striving to become Ubermensch or Choujin or Superman, superhuman, or Overman. For me, this is what it seems like Ishida is using as the framework, as the soul for his story. It is extremely similar to Tokyo Ghoul using Franz Kafka's Metamorphosis as its framework. So now that we have Friedrich Nietzsche's Ubermensch in its core idea potentially, everything somewhat rotates around it to influence it even further, which comes in the form of the symbolic animals that represent Tokio and Azuma. So Tokio, obviously a vulture. There's a lot of different things that makes him a vulture. There's a painting on his wall, him getting bullied for looking like a vulture, and then Azuma kind of uplifting him in a certain type of way. And basically vulture symbolism is linked to death, rebirth, equalizing, perception, trust, seriousness, resourcefulness, intelligence, cleanliness, and protection. That's straight out of Google. In many cultures, the vulture symbolizes a guardian or messenger between life and death, the physical world and the spirit world. Do you see how that fits perfectly into Ubermensch, especially when you're conflicting both sides? If there's going to be a clash between Choujins, which is obviously going to happen, but on the more Ubermensch side of its scale, clash of moralities, a clash of ideals, and Tokio may be someone that represents both the human world and the Choujin world. Funny enough, very similar to Kaneki from Tokyo Ghoul, which is even more funny that it's very similar to Franz Kafka's Metamorphosis, a person that lives in both worlds. Azuma is represented by a lion, the children saying that he is more indicative to being a lion and the personality or strength, power that he upholds. So thanks to Google, a lion is a very diverse symbol. Its most common traits are majesty, strength, courage, justice, and military might, commonly referred to as the king of beasts. It is a symbol of kingly power and might. As of right now, just reading this is the bare bone symbolism for vultures and lions, or Tokio and Azuma. But how that correlates to their journey, it's most likely going to go down a path of a very conflicting morality or ideals between both of them, where they both have power. Tokio, being a vulture, may want to merge both worlds together with his ability to bring humanity up with him, as the concept of Ubermensch revolves around the entirety of humanity becoming Ubermensch, whereas Azuma potentially may be the complete opposite. He may seek to be the pinnacle of power, pinnacle of the next stage of evolution, and he may only want other Choujin, other Ubermensch, and not the people that technically aren't Choujin or aren't quote-unquote chosen. It kind of depends on what way Ishida wants to obviously play on both of these individuals and how far their newfound abilities pushes them over the edge. We already know that the power of Choujin itself warps and manipulates the mental state of the individual, so Azuma, being very kind, prideful, and caring now, can warp itself into something a lot more dangerous. The exact same thing can be seen for Tokio. I know there may be a lot of things here. Yes, I have overthunk it quite a bit, but very similar to the Tokyo Ghoul and Tokyo Ghoul Re-Days, I'm hoping I've provided enough weight or substance to make it somewhat believable, to actually make it feel like it could be a possibility that Ishida is using the Ubermensch concept and how that correlates to the vulture, lion symbolism, etc., etc. This is going to be an ever-escalating thing. A lot more stuff is going to be added over time, undoubtedly, so keeping an eye on it, continuously talking about it and propping it back up is always a great thing. But hopefully this is a decent starting point. It gives you a general outline of what Ubermensch is and what that could be in terms of Choujin X, and how he's using it as the soul of his new story, which is almost identical to Tokyo Ghoul and its soul. The greatest thing is that you can think all of this is silly. You don't have to believe it, you don't have to love it or appreciate it. That's perfectly fine. If you hate it, you can go along your day and still enjoy what Choujin X provides. That's the beauty of symbolism and the reason why it's a harness. It's a micro story within a macro story. It's something that you can not pay attention to whatsoever and still enjoy the main story that it provides, but for everyone else that does enjoy looking further, that does enjoy Sui Ishida's symbolic messages and meanings that he's played throughout his narrative, this is only the beginning, and I'm extremely excited to see where he goes from here. So with that being said, that is basically it. I would like to know what you think of this general consensus. The Ubermensch, Tokyo, Azuma conflicting vulture, lion symbolism, whatever it may be. Actually, maybe you even found your own symbolism, because there's definitely a lot more in there, and there's a lot you can severely overthink, but for some that's a fun thing to do. So do let me know if this video interested you and if you found your own symbolism, done your own deep dive and detective work. I'd love to hear your thoughts. But I want to thank you all for watching. Hope you enjoyed. Drink plenty of water. New video every 3 days, and I will see you within the next one. Goodbye.